Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Holl, and this is a Camp Rauchbier show recorded live at the Wallenpaupack Brewery in Pennsylvania with head brewer Logan Ackerley. It's a conversation about building recipes, culinary inspirations, and all the smoke you can drink. But first, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. There, you can find original articles, reviews, news, insights, and podcasts. Listen to shows like Brewer to Brewer and the All About Beer podcast simply by searching All About Beer wherever you listen to shows. And don't forget, you can follow All About Beer on Instagram, Threads, X, and Facebook at All About Beer. And to keep up with all of the smoked beer news and releases, check out This Week in Rauch Beer by searching the group on Facebook or follow at TW Rauch Beer on X, Threads, and Instagram. Glassware and limited apparel is available too on allaboutbeer.com/merch. This show and all of the work we do, it's supported by you. Please go visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Really, a few dollars goes a long way to help keep the content fresh and to fund writers, photographers, creators, and editors. And if you'd like to learn more about advertising on this show or any of our shows, please email info@allaboutbeer.com. So I was invited to participate in a beer dinner at Wallenpaupack Brewing Co in Holl, Pennsylvania. It's a brewery that I know quite well because it's not too far from a lake house that my in-laws have. And so I'm able to get there a few times a year. And over that time, I've gotten to know the team there, including owner Becky Ryman, who's been on the show in the past, and Logan Ackerley, the head brewer who did a guest stint on This Week in Rauch Beer. The brewery is in the craft brewery cookbook. So on a recent Sunday night, we all gathered for a wonderfully prepared 4-course meal. And beforehand, Logan joined me for a conversation that goes into his career, brewing philosophy, and his love of Rauch beer. Here's our conversation.
Yeah, probably should have introduced myself.
That's right. For those who are unfamiliar, give us the quick rundown, because I want to unpack your career as we go along for all of this, but give us the quick rundown as to when and where you were born, what your childhood was like, the traumas that you suffered during it, that led you to become a very successful brewer.
Right.
Yeah.
Who hurt me, basically.
Or just, how did you become a brewer? We can leave the childhood trauma stuff until beer 4, and then
then we'll get into that. So I always say I kind of just drank my way to a job. Shortly after, actually just before I graduated college, a brewery called Abandoned Brewing Company opened up about 2 miles from where I was living. And my buddy and I would just go there and hang out, have beers every once in a while. And when they needed help behind the bar, they asked us if we were interested in getting a job. So started as a beer tender there and kind of just helped out wherever, building a pavilion and doing whatever odd jobs they had around the place. And then it was kind of right place at the right time. Our saleswoman left, and I took over for her. And then shortly after that, our assistant brewer left. I took over for him. Did about 1.5 years there. After that, went to Old Saratoga Brewing Company, which is now defunct.
I was going to say RIP, yeah.
Yeah, 2018, I think they closed down. But I was there for about a 1.5 years there as well. Learned a lot. It was a huge system. Abandoned was a 10-barrel system. Old Saratoga was a 125-barrel system. So it was pretty large for a craft brewery. Did about 1.5 years there, and then saw a job listing for Wallenpaupack, and had never heard of Lake Wallenpaupack or the area in general, right. But saw that it was only like an hour from where I grew up, and figured even if I couldn't find an apartment, I had a place to live, I could commute, and it actually ended up working out. I got in on the ground floor. My first day was the grand opening, so been doing it ever since.
I love that because, so much of your time at Abandon and then at Old Saratoga, everything that you were learning, I think from knowing you over these last couple of years has helped inform the beer program here. It's hard to talk about beer to people these days? There's 10,000 breweries in the country. Beer seems to be everywhere, but it's still, okay, well, yeah, I either like beer or I don't, is I think what you get from a lot of folks. When you're in a tourist destination like this, people kind of either come looking for familiar flavors, or they're going to ask, what kind of wine you have on offer, or, can I get a cocktail or,
Yep.
or something like that. So the educational role that you've played here through the beer program and what the brewers have done here over the years, I think has been critically important to furthering beer culture from here. And so I guess I want to start off with, what's your philosophy as a brewer when you try to begin making a new beer, a new to you beer? Where do you start?
Well, first, I appreciate you saying that, because we did put a big emphasis on, when we first opened up here, this was a pretty underserved, still could be argued that it is still underserved area for craft beer. So we put a big emphasis on trying all different kinds of styles. We made a little bit of everything and tried to do it well. But with that did come a lot of new beers that we had never brewed, I had never brewed. Some I've never even had other than the one we made. So it's kind of tough when you're going with that. A lot of research goes into it. I would say that's where I start no matter what. I look into the history of the style, where it originated, if there are any certain ingredients. I don't think that's too unique. That's kind of where you have to start,
right,
if you haven't had something. Other than that, I go out in the market, try to find a beer of that style and see what we like about it, what we don't like about it, what we would change. We're pretty lucky here. We have it's a 20-barrel system, but we also have a 1-barrel pilot system. So some of our more successful recipes started out on that 1-barrel pilot system. Early on, that wasn't operational, so everything just went to 20 barrels, and we hoped for the best.
Yeah.
Most of them worked out, some of them didn't. But with that pilot system, we're really able to dial in and do a couple iterations before we throw it out there. So our English Pale Mild was one of those recipes that started on the pilot system. We did a couple iterations before we threw it on the full system, and then it actually won us a silver at GABF. So having that small system to mess around with, both for traditional styles like an English Pale Mild, or weird random ingredients that we just want to try, like we did a carrot beer and like all that kind of stuff.
With carrot flour, or
it was?
Did you julienne?
It was carrot puree.
Okay.
Which that's also a great thing about our facility, is we have a full kitchen, and we can kind of throw some weird stuff at them when they have downtime, if they have downtime.
I was going to say, does Scott the chef, does he dread the calls from you sometimes where it's like, so I have this idea.
Oh, yeah.
And if you have the juicer warmed up.
Yeah, the number of times I've had to borrow their blender or the food processor or whatever just to process some fruit. And now we have a big commercial smoker outside, so we did, I don't know if we want to talk about it yet, but we did a crazy Rauchbier with all kinds of smoked ingredients, so it's just really nice to have them out back. But yeah, Scott was definitely cursing my name that day. So
I do want to talk about this Rauchbier in a second, but you have hardware on the wall. You mentioned winning a medal at the Great American Beer Festival. You've won World Beer Cup awards. You've been decorated. The brewery's been decorated with some really wonderful accolades from various competitions, various judging panels, always done blind. Are you a style traditionalist, or do you like to color outside of the... obviously, when you're in those big competitions, there's guidelines you have to follow. But then there's other times when I stop in and I have some of your beers, and it's like, okay, this probably wouldn't medal, but this is really... because it just doesn't fit inside the very tight confines. But it's like, this is really good beer. So where do you fall as a brewer? Is it competition, everyday drinking mind, and then... this is mess around beer time?
Yeah, I'd say at the end of the day, it's about the beer and what the consumer likes. Awards are great, and we're very proud of the ones we've won and the beers that have won them. But really, it's about what people like to drink and what I like to drink. So yeah, I would say I definitely started, and I'm still pretty traditional, but there are plenty of times where we take liberties that, is just, nobody asked for that.
Right.
Like it was like nobody asked for 52% smoked malt mini Bach.
I did.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, aside from you and maybe a handful of people online, but so like, yeah, we go pretty traditional, and I like doing like traditional lagers, a lot of European styles in general.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of my training was. At Abandon, we did a ton of Belgian style beers, and then at Old Saratoga, I brewed a ton of lager. So kind of learned, and that was all true to style. There wasn't really messing around. It was like we're shooting for that style.
What I love and what I'm frustrated about with this conversation is that you've just opened up about 9 threads that I want to pull on all at once. But let's talk about lager for a second, because here in Pennsylvania, 9 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10, if you say lager, somebody's going to say Yuengling, or that's what they're going to be thinking. And it's a perfectly fine product. It sells really well. You've brought a lot of, and the brewery's brought a lot of diverse lager flavors to the region, where for a long time it was just, if you said lager, it was going to be that amberish, sweetish, product that came out of Pottsville. What's your approach to lagers? How do you, when you're starting, it sort of goes back to that first question that I have. When you're starting with a blank slate and you say, okay, I want to make a Helles, and that's the beer that just happens to be in front of the two of us at this moment. I want to make a Helles. From start to finish, like where does it begin, and then how does it for you, at the end of it, how do you know that this is what you wanted it to be?
That's a tough one, because we do so many different styles of lager. They kind of start from different places. Something like this Helles that we're drinking, it was, it's really more malt driven than hop. We obviously have noble hops in there, but it's really about the malt and the process. I would say process has really been our main focus for the last couple of years. We'd always, we thought we were doing a good job, and I think we were doing well. But these lagers that we've been putting out the last couple months have been way ahead of where we were. Like, it's, hindsight's 2020. You're looking back, and I'm like, man, was that Pilsner that I gave John Holl even that good? Like, you're being polite.
No.
But, like...
You've known me long enough to know that, it's, yeah. Right. I'm either going to text you afterwards and be like, hey, way to go, buddy. Or you're going to be like, hey, what'd you think? And I'm just going to leave you on red. Yeah, it's...
Fair enough. Fair enough. But yeah, so honestly...
Which I don't think I have done. So, let's just,
I've never gotten one of those texts, so I'm glad to hear that. But
so what changed then?
So process in general. So now we are, for the last a little over 2 years, I started a For the Love of Lager series. So then every beer is For the Love of Lager, Munich style Helles, or German style Pilsner, or whatever the style of lager is. Those beers tend to be more true to style, so we try to stick with tradition for those. We do decoction mashing, which honestly for us, the way we do it, because our brew house wasn't designed for decoction, it honestly allowed us...
And I'm going to pause just because there might be some blank stares. Very quickly, what's decoction mashing for those who are unfamiliar?
Fair. Decoction mashing is when you split a portion of your mash and boil it, grain and all, and then use that boiled portion of mash to heat up the rest of your mash. And what that does is it breaks down the grains a little more. You can get a little more attenuation. You can get a little more malt character. For us, our decoctions seem to be more on the attenuation side, so the beers ferment out a little drier. I remember, our Pilsner used to finish at, 3.3 Plato, which isn't exceptionally sweet, but for a Pilsner, you really want that dry, crisp feeling. So decoction for us has been more as a way to attenuate the beers to a drier finishing gravity. So 2.5, sometimes a little lower for that. So just in drinkability, the less sugar you have for most styles, I would say, is, makes them a little more drinkable, a little more, people say crushable. Mm-hmm. And then, so decoction, we've changed where our hop additions go for all of our German style lagers. We were doing, especially for our Pilsner, we were doing a lot of late addition hops, so no dry hopping on our Pilsner, but we were doing like 15-minute and Whirlpool additions, and we just were never thrilled with the results. Like, again, looking back, it's like, was that beer even that good?
Right.
I enjoyed it at the time, but thinking about where our lagers are now, I don't know. But so we backed everything. We do first wort hopping. So first wort hopping is when you add hops while you're transferring the wort into the kettle. And they say that gives a more gentle bitterness. And then we do a 60, maybe a 45, and a 30. Nothing after 30 minutes. And that has really cleaned up our hop profiles. We don't get... the only way I can think to say it is like flabby.
Yeah.
Some late hop addition lagers just aren't as. You can get great aroma out of them, but on the tongue they kind of fall a little too round for me.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, and I know that if we're here with folks for a beer dinner right now, but if you went out into the tap room on a random Wednesday in the middle of July and started talking this way to the customers, like they would very quickly eyes glaze over and just like, I just want to drink beer, man.
Right, as most are here.
No. But I think that the real, what I've learned over time at least, is when you're on your third beer and you're only planning on 2, because it's just speaking to you in that way, that's that evolution that you're talking about, I think.
Yeah, that's something we've been chasing for a long time. I always say, I feel like everybody wants their next beer to be the best beer they ever had, and they want to rate it on Untappd and say how good it was. But I want to make beers that your first one, yeah, you're pleasantly surprised, you're enjoying it. Then after that, you don't even think about it. You forget you're even drinking a beer. You're just hanging out with your friends or family or whatever. I think there's a lot to be said about beer you don't have to think about.
Yeah. But also, you're in this vacation place, this place where people are here, they're unwinding, their minds hopefully a little bit more relaxed. They are, maybe spending a couple more bucks than they normally would, kind of thing. There's a feeling of goodwill that I would say probably 80% of the people who walk through here, because it's lake life. It's here for all of that as well. So you could have kept the beers the way that they were, but I love the fact that you're continuously trying to improve. And we've had these conversations offline over the years of you trying to get better. But I think that has probably helped the brewery writ large to get repeat customers, to get people come back in, because you're feeding into that good feeling.
I like to think so. And yeah, that's a big thing for this area. We always say, think about any time you go on vacation, wherever you go, that's probably the happiest you've been.
Yeah.
So the experience is great, unless it's really bad. But for the most part, the experience is great, and you associate that with pleasure, essentially. So in your mind, you go home and you're like, man, I can't wait to get back to Lake Wallenpaupack and have a beer, that kind of thing.
That's how I feel. So I want to switch gears just a little bit, because we talked about lagers, but now I want to talk about culinary ingredients. And we're here for this really fun beer dinner. This menu is incredible. The beers that go along with it are just. I'm really curious about these pairings because I'm excited about them. But you've done some culinary beers in the past where you've used food ingredients. There's a Rauchbier on the table right now, pineapple smoke show. It's pineapple mezcal margarita inspired with smoked malt, smoked sea salt, smoked pineapple, agave, and lime in here. I'm excited about trying this, but talk to me before we fully dive into that about your approach as a brewer when it comes to food.
Using food ingredients in beer, or
Sure.
just it's, again, I feel like I could say this about everything, but it kind of depends on what you're going for. This one we had, I don't even remember. We were just spitballing ideas here. We knew we wanted to do at least one beer with like some culinary inspired ingredients for the beer dinner, and this pineapple mezcal margarita came up. It was probably me, actually, because we had just had a mezcal margarita for the first time a couple months ago, and it was game-changing. So
Yeah.
thinking about all the flavors that go into that provides a really interesting challenge for beer in general. So you kind of deconstruct whatever you are modeling it after, if you are modeling it after. So this one
Yeah.
was clearly modeled after
It's an homage to that cocktail.
a drink.
Yeah.
So everything that's in those drinks, so mezcal is a little smoky. How do we get that smoke? As you know, we love smoke beers here.
Yeah.
Rauchbier, as I know you do too. So we went a little further than, like, we could have just used smoked malt, and that would have been fine. But this one, we really wanted to layer the flavors in, just like Scott in the kitchen would layer flavors into his dishes. He has all kinds of seasonings that he can use, so we're trying to do that as well. So we used oak and beechwood smoked malts to get two different, oak smoked malt can be pretty gentle. I didn't know if it would come through enough for, mimicking mezcal. So we threw some beechwood in to get a little bit more of that. Then the smoked pineapple we also wanted to do, just because of the calling it a pineapple mezcal margarita. So we actually smoked pineapple rings and pineapple puree. Took up Scott's smoker for one day with that. You definitely get pineapple on the nose of this beer.
Yeah.
So the pineapple's there. We got the smoked malts. We also smoked sea salt for it, just for
That's
another
what it is.
layer.
Yeah.
So we kind of went like a goza, but it wasn't actually kettle soured. So we, a margarita, you put salt on the rim.
Yeah.
I don't want to rim the glasses at the bar.
So
we
you
just
want the
put it right in
bartenders
there.
to still like you
Yeah.
afterwards. Yeah.
Right,
It's like,
as much as
hey
they
guys,
can,
we
I
have a
guess.
new beer, but guess what? I've added a third step.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you're making beer cocktails. But so the smoked salt, you get that, it adds mouthfeel, and it amplifies the smoke even more.
Yeah.
And this is a beer that will be on the dinner tonight, guys, so you will get to try this.
Yeah, you're going to hear about this again in just a minute. This is more for the radio audience right now, which, by the way, as I opened one as you were talking, everybody needs to get to Holl, Pennsylvania right now if you're a Rauchbier fan. This
It's a fun little beer.
I'm smitten. This is really nice. You mess around with smoke quite a bit. You did one of my favorite beers in the past at the Denver Rare Beer Tasting and bourbon barrel aged Graditsky, which I think we've talked about on a show in the past.
On This Week in Rauchbier.
On This Week in Rauchbier, the world's most award-winning, longest-running podcast about smoked beer. But you mentioned this pocket bock that you did, which was also, I think, the toast of, or one of the toasts of the Little Beers Festival recently. Because people think Bock, I know our good friend Lou Bryson was just talking about this as well, but people think Bock, they're thinking big monster beer. You went in at 4%? 4%?
Yeah.
And 52% smoked malt?
Yes.
So, all right, so talk about that beer to build that out a little bit, and then the naysayers who were complaining that a Bock needs to be not 4%.
Yes, we did get quite a bit of that. That was a fun one, too. That was actually really specifically brewed for Little Beer. Once we got the invite for that, I was like, all right, we do a lot of low ABV lager, and we had our English Pale Mild as well. But I wanted something unique. It's not very often we get to pour in other states, let alone down in Georgia.
Let alone Duluth, Georgia.
Yeah, right. So Pocket Bock was actually a pretty simple one, but a risky one. We took our 8% Doppelbock grist, so all the grains, all the same percentages, scaled it down to 4% because we wanted to be drinkable. And then we literally just subbed one for one the Munich malt that was in our Doppelbock with cherry wood smoked malt, which is also a Munich style, they say. So it was 52% smoked malt. And that beer, I mean, it hits you in the face with smoke.
Right.
So if you're like, when you take that first sip or two, it's a little jarring. It can be if you're not ready for the smoke. But if you stick with that beer, it is one of the most pleasantly drinkable, like really nice and sweet, but not cloying.
Yeah.
Because it did finish at a low gravity. Pungent with the smoke, but you get almost like actual cherry, not just cherry wood. So that one was kind of just like scaling down a beer, but it came out nice. So.
Rauchbier's polarizing, as you know, as I know, as anybody who's ever had one for the first time. It's like, oh, this is terrible. Give me more. It really takes having a couple of rounds of Rauchbier, smoke beer, to come around to it, kind of thing. You guys always seem to be doing one, and I'm just wondering if this is just like you blowing off steam, or like have you created a little pocket of demand here among regulars of like, what's new in Rauchbier world, Logan?
I think there is some aspect of that, actually. Like as long as we don't rebrew a Rauchbier, okay. If we ever brew it a second time, it doesn't sell. Okay. But if we do it one time, it goes over really well. People are excited to try, and we always try to mix it up. We haven't done like the most traditional Rauchbier, which is like a Rauchmärzen or like.
It's also, I mean, Schlenkerla has that locked in. Right. I mean, it's Yeah.
So with the the craft side of things, we always try to mix up what smoke we're using, what types of malt, what style of beer. We actually did a collaboration with Rusty Rail Brewing back in December.
I don't know Rusty Rail.
November.
Okay.
They're down in, I want to say, Mifflinburg.
Okay. Is that in Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But they don't get to do a lot of, I mean, like many brewers, don't get to do a lot of smoked beers.
Yeah.
But Becky, our owner here, allows me to do those things here. So we teamed up with them, and we actually did a Baltic Porter with pecan smoked malt from Caleb at Sugar Creek Malt in Indiana. Yeah. So, and that malt was nuts. Yeah. Like, so thank you. But like pecan smoked malt, I can't tell you another pecan smoked beer that I've had.
Yeah.
Like, so we try to have fun with it, and I do think it has a little bit of a following up here.
For the brewers that are listening at home right now and who just heard you shout out Becky Ryman, the owner here, for the brewers listening at home, isolate that audio and then bring it to your own owners and be like, see, they're doing it in the Poconos.
Yeah, Northeast Pennsylvania.
Why can't we do it here?
Right.
And it's working. And so, and it's like, oh, the owner would never go. We have it on tape. Like, right. Becky is all for it.
You'll make tens of dollars.
Right. How do you make tens of dollars when but also by spending, thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's, what's the old joke? It's how do you make a small fortune in craft beer is start with a large fortune.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So you've been doing some really cool stuff in the brew house. You've been trying different things. You've been doing this lager program. I mean, even that your approach to hazy IPAs, I think, has a certain Logan-ness to them. You can't not make hazy IPAs. I know from knowing you for years, it's not your favorite. So, how have you made hazy IPAs to your taste as a brewer, as opposed to just like, oh, it's such a mosaic?
So honestly, that's probably the hardest thing I've had to do as a brewer, because I was trained on Belgian beer and lager.
Yeah.
And at that time, old school IPA, so like West Coast. It took a while for us to get, stable haze, to figure out all these things. Early on when hazy IPAs came out, everybody was saying, oh, they're lazy, they're, whatever. But there's actually a lot.
I'm still saying that.
Yeah,
But yeah.
that's fair.
Yeah.
But there's a lot that goes into it, and a lot we had to learn. A lot more. Some brewers are. Most brewers are a lot better at chemistry than I am. Chemistry is kind of a big part of this, but thank you, Jeff. Learning how to keep that stable haze, and we have a centrifuge here, so we always wanted to centrifuge our hazies so that you don't get that sludge in the bottom and things floating in your hazy IPAs. But if you're in a centrifuge of hazy, you really have to get that stable haze. So it was a big learning curve. We tend to be a little drier than a lot of hazy IPAs, and honestly, probably a little less hopped than a lot of hazy IPAs.
Okay.
We still put probably 3 to 4 pounds per barrel in the beer, but you hear of 4 pounds per barrel in the dry hop.
Yeah.
Like we're maybe 2 to 2.5 pounds per barrel in a dry hop on a hazy.
Yeah, it hasn't. I mean, what I've learned over time is that it's not necessarily about the poundage that goes into it. It's using it the right way, and it's having the rest of the beer understand those ingredients. Because I mean, I remember Wren House years ago in Arizona was doing 13 pounds per barrel just just for fun.
Right.
And because they wanted zero efficiency,
exactly.
Out of it.
One keg.
And they're like, yeah, but we could still do it with 2 pounds per barrel. Right. So yeah, it's.
Yeah. So honestly, like what you just said, it has to work with the rest of the beer. So the grist was a big thing for us. Honestly, the first time I got stable haze in a hazy IPA was because I just took our Hefeweizen recipe, which is 53% wheat and Pilsner malt. I just did that, and then hopped it like an IPA, and that's the first time we got stable haze.
Which I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, I remember years ago, oh God, who was it? It was Phil at Two Roads talking about how Hefeweizen was the original hazy beer. So if you're just going to use that as a base,
and it worked, but it was lacking, a lot of the other things that people want in a hazy IPA. So then at that time we were using all kinds of flaked oats, flaked wheat, malted oats, wheat malt, like all different kinds of things. Tried that and it worked. So for a while I stuck with, mostly wheat, Pilsner, and then a little bit of oats. Now actually we're still changing every time. We have a rotating double IPA series that we never use the same hop combination in.
Actually, or is it like this time we did Citra and El Dorado, and now we did El Dorado and Citra? You're not doing that old joke.
It's not like that. We're only on.
I need new material. It's 2024. I need new material. Yeah.
But that's fair. It's we're only on number 37, but we haven't doubled up yet. So, but we change it every time. We've been changing the grist again. Now we're using oat malt and unmalted wheat. We dry. Actually, I shouldn't say dry them out, but we ferment our hazy double IPAs to right like 3.8 to 4 Plato, which is drier than some. I'm sure other people go drier.
Yeah.
And then our single hazy IPA is right around 3.28, 3. So yeah, I mean, like you said, they're not my favorite thing to brew. I don't get as excited about them, but I did have a realization recently that if we're putting all this effort into making our lagers better, we should also be putting the effort into making the rest of our beers better. So we're doing the chilled whirlpool thing now, all that kind of stuff. So we're getting there.
I like that. So lagers are dialed in, IPAs are dialed in. Where, as a brewer, where do you want to put your attention next? Is there a style that is in your brain somewhere that you really want to attack and get to know and then like execute well?
Honestly, I'm kind of amped up on Belgian beer again. Kind of back to
coming off of your World Beer Cup win.
Yeah. Even just brewing that beer before we knew it won anything. But yeah, we won for a Belgian Golden Strong, and I just love how that beer came out.
Oh yeah, no, that's a cheering moment. That's like a big, yeah. I just wanted to remind everybody at home that you all were still here. That's fine. It's like, yeah.
Right.
Everybody thought you left 25 minutes ago when we started talking about decoction.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that beer, and then because we had to reuse that yeast, because that was an expensive pitch of yeast, we didn't have time to grow that one up. We actually brewed a Belgian quad with Pinot Noir grape juice in the fermentation. So, I mean, Belgian in general, I'm just really liking the dry, that dry, effervescent, really expressive yeast character. So I'd like to get into that. And then our Hefeweizen, I'm never happy. I love our Hefeweizen. I'm happy with it.
It's great beer.
But at the same time, I'm not happy with it. Like I want to dial that one in too. So
I like, having known you now for years, I like that you are constantly in pursuit of making the beers better. And there are a handful of brewers that I've met over time who are never fully satisfied, who are always constantly tweaking from batch to batch. And you'd never know it unless you were in the brew house and paying attention. But like all of a sudden you just wake up one day and you're like, oh, wow, that's really, you're one of those brewers who does that. So keep doing what you're doing and with the team in the back.
I appreciate that.
I know you've been on this show before. Have I asked you the Green Door question?
You did out of nowhere on the This Week in Rauchbier.
Did I? All right. I'm going to ask you again, though. So you have to come up with a new answer now because This Week in Rauchbier doesn't count. So the Green Door question is this. On the television show The Good Place, in the final season, they introduce a concept of a green door where the characters walk through it and can be anywhere doing whatever they want to be doing. And so if we had a green door on our plane of existence, Logan Ackerley, and this conversation ended and you could walk through it and be at any pub or any brewery anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Who would you want to be with? And what would you like to be drinking?
I think I have a better answer than last time.
Didn't I ask us? Wasn't it Rauchbier specific last time?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it
this
was
is
Rauch.
yeah.
That's
So this
true.
is not.
That's
yeah.
true. And I think we changed it to dive bar too.
Right. Right. Yeah. So this is the original question. Then.
Right.
Yeah. Any pub, any brewery, anywhere in the world. Where would you go? Who would you want to be with, and what would you like to be drinking?
So I always like to embarrass my wife at these beer dinners. And she's up at the bar. Oh, she just turned around. So everybody look at her, please. So this is my embarrassing part. We're about to welcome our first kid.
Woo!
Thank you. We're having a baby girl, and next month. So coming soon. So I think I would want to be up in the Finger Lakes, probably at Abandon, because that's where we got married. I'd be drinking the peppercorn saison that they have, and I'd be with my wife and our baby girl.
I love that. Keep it going for Logan Ackerley, everybody. We're going to get going into the dinner for a minute, but thanks for doing this.
Thanks a lot,
Keep
John.
it going means
This
like,
is awesome.
yeah, just like, woo, yeah. Again, my big thanks to Logan, Becky, Scott, and the whole team at Wallenpaupack Brewing Company for a great evening. Do you want to do a beer dinner or a live audience podcast? Or if you have questions, comments, or guest suggestions, you can do that by emailing me. It's John Holl, that's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com. A reminder, go visit that website where you can check out the podcast page, the merch page, and read great new content, as well as the archives going back to 1979. Follow All About Beer on social media at All About Beer. And if you're interested in supporting journalism in the beer space, like what we're trying to do, email us at info@allaboutbeer.com or go to patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Don't forget, All About Beer has a podcast channel now. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast that comes out on the 15th of every month. And don't forget to check out probrewer.com each week for original articles from the All About Beer team. As for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Holl. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.